بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So this particular segment is known to most or all of you because we talked about the importance of ibadah and the fact that ibadah is your means to the scale, and the fact that your interior will not be straight until your exterior is straight. And there is a mutual relationship between the two. There is no dichotomy, there is complete harmony. And if you want to be good inside, you need to be good outside as well, inside and outside. So we talked about all of this, and we talked about the comprehensiveness of ibadah in Islam. And now we'll talk about the two conditions. The two conditions for the acceptance of ibadah. Ibadah is not valid until you have fulfilled two conditions for the validity and acceptance of that ibadah. These two conditions are what? Sincerity and authenticity. Al-ikhlas was-sawab. أن يكون العمل خالصا وصوابا. Fudail ibn Iyad was asked about Allah saying, لِيَبْلُوكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, to test you who's better in deeds or action. He asked him, what is أحسن عملا? And then he said, ما كان أخلصه وأصوابه. أخلصه وأصوابه. That which is sincere and that which is correct. Correct meaning what? Meaning authentic. Because the measuring stick is what? Is that which Allah had sent down to His Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The first of these two conditions is the more important of the two conditions, which is sincerity. And why do I say it's the more important of the two conditions? Correctness is not unimportant. Correctness is extremely important. And we will see why correctness is essential for sincerity. Like, you can't really be totally sincere until you are correct, until you follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and you adhere to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But after all, sincerity is number one, and correctness is number two. And sincerity is the most important, because if the action is not sincere, it is all in vain. It is all in vain. It is like someone who goes to the lake, for fishing. You could go to a lake that doesn't have any fish. And no matter how good you are at fishing, and no matter how good your equipment is, the lake does not have fish. So stay there forever. You're not catching anything. The lake does not have fish. That is basically the one who's not sincere. You could be as correct as you want. You could be as strict as you want, and correct as you want, and exact as you want, and precise as you want. But the lake does not have fish. You're coming to the wrong place. If you don't have sincerity, you won't have anything. Now, the one who is incorrect, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may pardon some of their incorrectness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the ruhban, the monks, فَأَتَيْنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ. We have given those who had faith amongst them the reward. And this is, though the Ruhban and the monks innovated this Rahbaniyya, or this monkship. It was an innovation. It was not something that Allah prescribed. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them the reward for their effort, some reward for their effort. Had they invested this effort in something that was better, they would have gotten a lot more reward. But then Allah did not waste all of the reward. at least some of their effort was rewarded, despite the fact that the act itself was not prescribed by Allah. Which means that if you are incorrect, but you want the pleasure of Allah, and you seek the pleasure of Allah, this is like going to the lake that has fish with faulty net. You have a faulty net, but the lake does have fish. So you may be able to catch something. The net has holes. Your actions are incorrect. The net has holes, but you may be able to catch something. Yes?
As a reefer, this touches my heart because when Allah allowed me to become Muslim, the sincerity was there from the beginning. I felt the appreciation and the love and the sincerity of what I was being given. But then I saw I had a lot to learn how to do it right. So I just found it like sincerity being more intuitive and correctness being more
Acquired.
Right.
By education and practice.
Sincerity being more of the heart.
Yes.
And the correctness being more of the mind, of the intellect.
Yes. And correctness is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you like time to acquire, to know, to learn, and to abide. But Allah wants sincerity from day one.
Shada.
You know. Yeah. Sincerity is always wanted, always required, because you could always be sincere. But correctness will develop over time. The more you know, the more correct you become. Allah said, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفَاءَ. And they were commanded not, but that they worship Allah with sincerity and straightforwardness. And it was reported by Nasai from Abi Umama radiallahu anhu that he said, جاء رجل إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال رأيت رجلا غزا يلتمس الأجر والذكر ما له فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا شيء ثم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله لا يقبل إلا ما كان خالصا وابتغي به وجهه. So Nasai reports from Abu Umama that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم was asked, what do you think of a man who went to a battle seeking the reward from Allah and failed? What will he get? The Prophet ﷺ said, nothing. Allah does not accept an action save it be sincere and only for the sake of His face. So, nothing. You get absolutely nothing. Because Allah does not accept partners. Allah does not accept you, ascribing partners to Him whatsoever. Even if such partners are not the idols. Because here, the partner was not idols. Because that is always, when we think of partners, we think of idols. But what was the partner here? Fame, celebrity, it is seeking your own gratification. Hawa.
Ego, trying to get
the ego. And hawa. The vain desires. Those vain desires could be desires for lust, money, celebrity, any of them. Here, you would have taken your desires for God beside God. The second of these two conditions, authenticity. The action has to be one that is prescribed by Allah and His Prophet ﷺ. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completed our deen prior to the departure of the Prophet ﷺ, who did not leave any good, but He enjoined us to do it, or any bad, but He warned us from it. Allah said, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. This day I have perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your religion. And certainly this famous hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha, من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس منه فهو رد. he who innovates in this affair of ours that which doesn't belong to it, it shall be rejected. And in a different report, من عمل عملا ليس عليه أمرنا فهو رد. He who does something that is not in accordance with what our affair or what we have conveyed, it shall be rejected. So not only the one who innovates, but the one who follows. Both will be rejected. The innovator, the instigator of the innovation, and the follower. The instigator of the innovation and the follower, their actions will be rejected. Think about it this way, when you explain it to people, because some people tend to, want everything to be spiritually communicated to them. So when you explain it to people, the importance of correctness, the importance of authenticity, the importance of following the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, Imam Malik has this report from him that is extremely, extremely beautiful. Because when you don't follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's betrayal of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. It's betrayal of his legacy. It is also an insult to the Prophet ﷺ. It's an accusation that he fell short of conveying the whole message, or he fell short of something that you could, beat him to. So Abu Nu'aym in his book Al-Hilya reported the man came to the Imam Malik and he said to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, min ayna uhrim? Oh Abu Abdullah, that's the kunya of Imam Malik. Where should I make ihram from? Or where should I start my ihram? See, so Imam Malik said to him, min Dhil Hulayfa min haythu ahram Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You make that from Dhil Hulayfa, from where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made his ihram. So the man said to Imam Malik, فإني أحب أن أحرم من المسجد من عند القبر. I would like to start my ihram here from the masjid next to the grave of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Imam Malik said to him, لا تفعل إني أخشى عليك الفتنة. Don't do it. I fear fitna for you. I fear fitna for you. So the man said to Imam Malik, وَأَيُّ فِتْنَةٍ تِلْكَ وَهِيَ أَمْيَالٌ أَزِيدُهَا. Which fitna are you talking about? I am adding miles to my ihram. I am making ihram earlier. The problem is when you make ihram is when you make ihram past the miqat, past the ihram site. That is when you get into trouble. When you make the ihram past the ihram site. So the man said to Imam Malik, I'm making it much earlier. I'm making it from here. I'm not waiting to the ihram site, I'm making it much earlier, so that should be greater reward. That should. So the Imam Malik said to him, what? Do you remember it? Because but he said to him, وَأَيُّ فِتْنَةٍ أَعْظَمْ مِنْ أَنْ تَظُنَّ أَنَّكَ سَبَقْتَ إِلَى خَيْرٍ قَصَّرَ عَنْهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. Which fitna is greater than to think that you beat the Prophet ﷺ to something good that he fell short of. So he is the Prophet, he is the Messenger of God, he's the role model. He is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, purified and exalted and elevated. And he is the one who was entrusted with the revelation to communicate to us. And anytime you do something other than the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or that is not done by the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, remind yourself of this statement of Imam Malik. Which fitna is greater than to think that you beat the Prophet ﷺ to something good? And how impolite is this? And how unfaithful is this to think that you can figure out something good that he did not convey to you, that he did not relate to you? If there is anything that will get you closer to Allah, the Prophet ﷺ told you of it. If it is anything that will get you closer to Allah, the Prophet ﷺ did not depart from this life until he conveyed it to us and he related to us. So in this case, just remember this all the time. And remember that this authenticity thing is very, very related to sincerity. You can't actually be sincere without trying to be correct. I'll give you an example. To Allah is the greatest parable. If you want to buy your mother a gift for Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr. There are many ways to go about this, you know. But who is more sincere? The one who will go to Amazon.com and just order anything and wrap it and give it to his mother, or walk or drive to Macy's and pick up the first thing that he finds on the racks and takes it for his mother, or the one who will say, what does my mother want? What does she need? What would she like the most? And he sort of puts effort into this and thought into it and tries to figure out. He may eventually end up buying something cheaper that cost him less effort or cheaper. But the effort that he put in, the thought that he put into this process is indicative of his love more than the person who just drove to Macy's and picked up the first thing that he found, no matter how big it is. So it's not about, because after all, it is not about the size. It is about the devotion in your heart. And those who are devoted, they know that we have to seek, closeness, proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by that which He likes, not that which we like. And how do you figure out what He likes except through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Except through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it is to be known that all the gates have been closed but His gate sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All the paths are leading you astray, but the path that He paved for you, and He walked in front of you on this path. And everything that He did, He walked in front of you. What else do you need? What more do you need? Not only this, Him and His companions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا وَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ. And if they believe in that which you have believed in, then they are guided. Who's being addressed here? The kuffar, the Sahaba, radwanullah alayhim. Allah is saying to them, if they, the kuffar, believe in that which you, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, believe in, they are guided. And if they don't, and if they walk away, then they are in shiqaq, which is what? Descent. Loss. Descent, anyway, descent with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are there's like another nice word for it. Anyway, but descent is good. That's good. You understand what it means. The point here is the Prophet ﷺ is making the way of the Sahaba a measuring stick here. He's telling them, if they follow you, they're guided. If they follow you, they are guided. So now you have the Prophet ﷺ, and you have his companions. And the beauty of this is, because the Prophet ﷺ is the best of the best, and he is complete and perfect, and his inclinations were all moderate. And we all should seek to imitate him. But sometimes you find in the Sahaba, some qualities that may be closer to you. There is this Sahabi who used to have a little bit of anger, in him. There is this Sahabi that used to be a little bit too shy, or this Sahabi that used to be a little bit this or that. The Prophet ﷺ reached the perfect balance in all qualities. But you could relate to many of the Sahaba that had some issues that are like yours, and you could see how they were able to handle those issues, overcome those issues. So you don't only have the Prophet, you have the Prophet. Certainly he is the ultimate role model. the ultimate role model, and the absolute role model. Everyone else is relative, the role model, but he's the ultimate role model. You have the Prophet and you have his companions. They walked on this path before you. And this ummah was great at conveying everything they did. And you can't find this in any other religion. You can't find the amount of accurate information about a whole generation like you find about the Prophet and his companions. Really, think about it. You know, think about the Bible. You know, we're not talking about, we're not comparing the Bible to the Quran. We're comparing the Sunnah, the Athar. The Athar of the Sahaba were verified more than the Bible is verified. Not the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The Athar of the Sahaba, statements from Umar radiallahu anhu, were verified because the interruption in the chain of narration in the Bible is huge. Think of when the Old Testament was written that we have now. You know, it was written in Babylon, you know, hundreds of years after it was revealed. And think of the New Testament, and think of the writers of the New Testament. Some of the writers are even unknown. You know, in the Revised Standardized Version, you find this book, this chapter, the author unknown, in the Revised Standardized Version. So the statements of Umar radiallahu anhu, statements of Abu Dhar, statements of all of those Sahaba were verified and kept for us and preserved for us better than the Bible itself. So you have all of this ni'mah, and certainly to reject all of this ni'mah and to try to figure out things on your own and to make up things and to innovate and to invent and so on, and to reject all of this ni'mah of all the life of the most guided generation, including the best of them, the Prophet ﷺ, being at your fingertips, is certainly like ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ungrateful to this ummah, wasteful of, you know, the wasteful from your aspect, from your side, of all of these efforts that were invested into relating to all of this ni'mah to you. So I'll stop here because next, inshallah, we'll talk about some tips towards excellence in ibadah. And we'll start, inshallah, tomorrow by the first of these steps, which is to hasten to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallah, inshallah. Then, today, inshallah, we'll start with this. These are some tips towards the excellence in ibadah. How do we reach the level of excellence in ibadah? After you fulfill the conditions, after you have fulfilled the conditions, which are the most important, purified your intention, which takes effort and takes practice, practice of doing things in secret, doing things in private, so that you could train yourself on seeking the pleasure of Allah only, not the pleasure of people. And after you have learned what is correct, because this is a matter that requires learning and education, and when you learn and when you go to classes, lectures, listen to YouTube, etc., when you're learning, that should be your main concern. My main concern is that I want to correct my ibadah. If your concern is basically intellectual growth, or mastery of certain subjects for only your intellectual integrity, then that is not the right purpose, that is not the right intention. And that you may get that, because people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives people what they want, what they desire, what they work for. فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله، ومن كانت هجرته إلى دنيا يصيبها امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. Whosoever's journey is for Allah and His Messenger, or immigration is for Allah and His Messenger, then it will be for Allah and His Messenger. And whosoever's immigration is for dunya, that he seeks, or worldly gains that he seeks, or a woman that he wants to marry, or also a man that she wants to marry, then their immigration is for that which they have intended. So you get what you want. You get what you work for. And if you learn for intellectual growth, you get what you want. You get the intellectual growth. But you don't benefit from that. Ultimately, that intellectual growth will be a valid currency in this life. You may enjoy it in this life. You may enjoy being intellectually superior in this life. But once the death comes, that currency becomes of the invalid ones. A lot of currencies become suddenly invalid upon death. All the dollars you have in your pockets, in your bank account, will become invalid currency. Your experience, skills, your lineage, your background, all of that becomes invalid currency. That is one of the things that will become invalid currency: unused knowledge or intellectual superiority. Even if you're intellectually superior in fiqh and Quran and hadith and so on. In fact, this may not only become invalid currency, it becomes also a liability, not an asset. So had you not known, it would have been better for you, because now this knowledge turns into a liability. After you enjoyed having it as an asset in this life, once you die, it turns into a liability. So, after you have fulfilled these two important conditions of sincerity and correctness, or authenticity, then you really need to start the walk and to hasten to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ. Hasten to forgiveness from your Lord and a paradise as wide as the heavens and the earth. أُعِدَّةٍ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, prepared for the pious. So that musara is important. And this musara, because we all hear that we need to hasten to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we all think that we need to hasten to Allah. But unless you have, you take the right steps, the right practical steps towards this goal, you can't say, you can't expect that you just wake up one day and you become of those who are musari'un, or those who will hasten to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sari'u ila maghfiratan min rabbikum, hasten to forgiveness from your Lord, means that you take some practical steps. Sometimes those practical steps may be preparatory. In other words, it may not be that you will just say, from today I will fast every Monday and Thursday, and I will pray, 8 rak'ahs of Qiyamul Layl, and I will do such and such, and then you sort of force it on yourself, because most likely you will fail, because all of this stuff needs preparation, and all of this stuff needs graduation. And so preparation and graduation is what you need to do to embark on these endeavors. Preparation, how do you prepare yourself? You prepare yourself by taking the right steps, changing some aspects of your lifestyle. If you work 2 full-time jobs and you don't need to work the 2 full-time jobs, if you need to work 2 full-time jobs because you just happen to have a large family, then you will have to basically invest in your intention here. Like if someone is incapable of running around and going to lectures here and there and seminars and this and that, because he has a large family and he has like family back home that he needs to maintain, and some family here, or he has sick children or something of that nature, that's absolutely fine. Because there are so many gates, there are so many paths in terms of acts of righteousness that would lead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we just went over the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, "As-sa'i al-amalati wal-miskin kal-mujahid fi sabilillah." He who works to maintain the widow and the poor is like one who is in a state of jihad. And it was also added that he is like one who is in prayer, that he in prayer without boredom, or he continues to pray without boredom, and he continues to fast indefinitely. But in this case, you really need to pay attention to the intention. You really need to correct your intention. You really need to enjoy ma'iyatullah azza wa jal, your togetherness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this work. When you're going to work, you make your adhkar. So what would prevent you from saying the adhkar when you're going to work? You're in your car, you're on the bus. What is preventing you? So you can't say that, I can't hasten to Allah because I'm too busy. Because if you have those two full-time jobs, but you leave your home with the right intention, you give up ostentation, aggression, injustice, be humble, leave your home with the right intention, make dhikr on your way, try to perfect your work and do the best you can, and watch Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your job, in your treatment of everybody around you while you're on your way at home, at the workplace, then you're hastening to Allah. You're making the effort. You're making the effort. Someone who's running around and attending seminars and lectures may not catch up with you. You may be way ahead of them, although you don't have the time, to do what they do. Or you may not have the time to participate in, Qiyam al-Layl at the masjid every Saturday if they started something of that nature. You may not have the time, but you're way ahead of them. So it really is an individual endeavor, and no one may ever have the right to say, I don't have time to hasten to Allah. You may not have time to attend lectures. You may not have time to pray the night prayers. You may not have time to fast, or you may not have the capacity or the power to fast Monday and Thursday or every other day. But you do, everybody has the ability to run to Allah and to hasten to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there is not one gate, there are many gates. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-tarim khamsan qabla khams, shababak qabla haramik, wa sahhataka qabla saqamik, wa ghina'ak qabla faqrik, wa faragak qabla shughlik, wa hayataka qabla mautik." Take advantage of 5 before 5, your youth before your old age, your health before your sickness, your wealth before your poverty, your free time before you become occupied, and your life before your death. So basically, human beings are always between those states of poverty and wealth and health and sickness and occupation and having free time. And as long as you have the ability to excel in your worship, excel. Because not only that you will have the reward of what you do now accounted for you, but if you excel when you're capable and when you're healthy, and then you become occupied or incapable, then you will continue to get the reward, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most generous. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most generous. And the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا مَرِضَ الْعَبْدُ أَوْ سَافَرَ كُتِبَ لَهُ مَا كَانَ يَعْمَلْ صَحِيحًا مُقِيمًا. If the servant, al-abd, becomes ill or travels, he will have the reward of what he used to do while at home and healthy, written for him indefinitely. So it continues to be written for you. So whatever it is that you start in your state of health, if you become sick, you will get the reward of this indefinitely. Whatever it is that you do routinely, that you do consistently in your state of faragh, When you have free time, you become occupied, and it will continue to be written for you indefinitely. So hasten to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make use of your free time, make use of your youth, because that is a prime time for seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through acts of worship that you may not have the ability to perform as diligently when you're older and more feeble or weaker. Take what Allah has prescribed for you as strength. خُذُوا مَا أَتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, خُذُوا مَا أَتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ. The children of Israel, and to us, 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 we have given you as strength. And this is also important because, the following of concessions, basically hunting for concessions, is not an attitude of someone who is a seeker of this path, the path of purification, the path of commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When there is a concession that is an established concession, then enjoy the ease that is given to you, that is extended to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and make use of that concession when there is an established concession. But basically hunting for concessions, is not the right attitude or the right approach of one who is devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who is devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes himself by the so-called al-azima, resolve, must have resolve on this path, because it's a path that requires resolve, requires determination, requires consistency. So that is the difference between enjoying the concession when there is one that is established and you need to act upon it, and between hunting for concessions. And be consistent, because the Prophet ﷺ said, أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ. This hadith was reported by Bukhari and Muslim, reported by Ahmad before that, and this is the wording of Ahmad, rahimahullah. Who's first, the Bukhari or Muslim or Ahmad?
Ahmad.
It is quite important, inshallah. Inshallah, there will be one time seminar, inshallah, by some other teacher on history of legislation. The next one that is coming is about Khulafa al-Rashidun, inshallah, by Imam Karim Abu Zayd. But history of legislation is very helpful because it's oftentimes sort of bad of us to confuse, the main figures in Islamic history and who was first and who came afterwards. Sometimes that leads to some silly mistakes. Someone says, for instance, how come Imam Abu Hanifa did not read this in the Bukhari? Imam Abu Hanifa died 42 years before Bukhari was born. Imam died in 150 and Bukhari was born in 192. So it is very important to just figure out who's who, and a little bit about the background of the main figures of Islamic history. Okay. So Imam Ahmad, this is the wording of Imam Ahmad, the most beloved deeds before Allah are those that are consistent, even if they were few or little. Which means what? It means that, when you hasten to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make sure that what you will do will be consistent, because the inconsistency, interruption is basically a setback on the way. it's a setback. Try to advance gradually, slowly but surely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because setbacks have an effect on your psyche, have effect on your ability to continue the journey. So when you go full force and then you give up, you quit much of what you do, that will have a very negative effect and will be very consequential to your to the health of this journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you want to start to pray at night, do your Qiyamul Layl, you start with 2 rak'ahs, right? And then you do 4, and then you do 6, and 8, and so on. When do you move from 2 to 4? When 2 become very easy for you. When 2 become like a second nature for you. Then you move to 4. Because keep in mind that it is not only the night prayers that you want to do. There are so many acts of goodness that you want to be involved in. So if you start by 2 rak'ahs, and then you become consistent with them, and add to them 2 more, that is basically doing it gradually, consistently, slowly but surely. And then you need to prioritize, because there are so many a'mal and so many actions that you need to give attention to, but prioritization is extremely important. So this is from Madarij al-Salikin by Imam Ibn al-Qayyim concerning prioritization and which of the a'mal are the best a'mal. But before this, there is a nice story given to us, or a nice parable given to us by Imam Ibn Qudama in his book Al-Wasiyya. So Imam Ibn Qudama in his book Al-Wasiyya tells us of a nice parable of people who were invited by a king to his presence, to his city of beauty and marvels and so on. And the king sent them a ship to bring them over to his city. And he sent with the ship a guide. And so the guide invited them to the city of the king to be honored by the king and rewarded by the king and so on. So they boarded the ship. And then on their way, the guide told them that there will be a rest stop, an island in the middle of the sea, where they will spend one day during this journey, from their side of the sea to the other side. There is an island in the middle. They'll spend one day. It will start by sunup and end by sundown. So they boarded the ship, and the guide started to give them instructions as to how they would deal with this phase of their journey. Because the guide, before they were aboard the ship, they did not have much choice. They were just on the ship, being taken to the other place. But when they arrived at this island, they would have choices now. So the guide started to give them instructions as to how to deal with this phase. And he basically told them that this island is full of gems. And the more you collect, everybody was given a sack to collect the gems in. And the more you collect of the most precious gems, the more you will be rewarded by the king. And the more you will be honored by the king when you reach his presence. So, some of them spent time with the guide. They stayed with the guide for a longer time to figure out which gems are best and how to figure out and to sort out the better gems from other gems. Some of them rushed to collect the gems, and they kept on, collecting all the gems, everything that shines, they would collect it, and they put them in a sack, and they worked hard to do that. Some of them decided to take a little time off and then carry on, afterwards. So they decided to play around a little bit at the shore and build castles of sand and, splash water on each other and do this, and just play and so on. Some of them started to trade gems with each other. And they started to, make money this way. Some of them started to build the shade. And some of them started to make the shade even better and more sturdier. Because they figured that, when it is noontime, there will be sun, and we want to have some shade to protect ourselves from the sun, and and so on. So they started to build shades, and they started to make them sturdier, and even some of them started to beautify the shades and so on. And some of them, the guide had told them that all of this island is for you. Do whatever you want. Go wherever you want. The whole island is for you. There is just one place on this island that is the sanctuary of the king, that you should not come close to, a palace in the middle of the island. This is the sanctuary of the king, and you should never approach that palace. So some of them would walk a little bit closer to the palace to just look at it. They wanted to look at it. They figured, just figure out what is the sanctuary of the king. What does it look like if, because they're sort of completely amused by this king and by, maybe they get a little bit taste of what we will have when we get to the king or into the presence of the king. So they get a little bit closer to that palace. And then many of them, when they get closer to the palace, they can't resist because it looks so beautiful, so attractive, that they walk all the way to the fence. And once they have walked all the way to the fence, and they start to look through the fence, then they can't resist. Inside the fence is all of the beauties and splendors and the harem of the king and so on. So they decided that most of them would mount the fence and get into the sanctuary. Keep in mind, the guy told them this is a forbidden sanctuary. And once they jump into the sanctuary, they get arrested, they get handcuffed, and they get brought back to the ship. And by, some of them also would decide to take a little nap. They would nap, wake up, take another nap, wake up. Some would, sleep through it. Everybody is doing their own thing. And then by sundown, all of them are taken by force back to the ship. So, and there is no respite. There is no extension. All of them are taken back to the ship by force. That's basically our story in this life, isn't it? The guide is the Prophet ﷺ. The king is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The island is this life. And the gems are the hasanat. And the forbidden sanctuary is maharim Allah azza wa jalla. Ala inna likulli malikin hima, ala inna hima Allahi maharimu. Every king has a forbidden sanctuary, and Allah's forbidden sanctuary is his prohibitions.
Except that everyone leaves at a different time.
Everyone leaves on a different time. But here, the thing is, everybody has a sun up and sundown. And your sundown is the time of your death. So everybody will be taken by force. The people who spent more time with the guide are the scholars, the ulama. They basically spent a little bit more time to figure out how they collect the best gems. Those are the people who prioritize, who can prioritize the most, because they know what is best at what time, in what circumstance. So the gems that they collected are not basically everything that shines. They collected the gems that are most precious, that are most appreciated by the king. So those are the scholars who spent a little bit more time with the guide, the Prophet ﷺ, learning from him what is best to do and what is not. And those that were, took naps are those who are lazy. They lack determination, they lack resolve. And they wasted their life, they wasted their time in this life. They may not be involved in haram, but those are, the people who like to just sit in their recliners and just spend time, thinking about nothing or doing nothing. And those who got involved in trading are the business people and the people who have greed for this money. They just figured. Those who started to build the shades are the people who take this dunya not as a bridge to the hereafter, but rather settle in it, or consider it a place of settlement. And then they start to build this dunya as if they are not departing, or as if their departure is not soon. And those who were very energetic about collecting the gems are al-Ubbad, the worshippers. They did not spend enough time to figure out which gems are better. They're good. They're good people, and they will get to a good place, inshallah. But then they're second best after the ulama, who spent more time so that they can prioritize and so that they can pick up the gems that are most appreciated by the king. But the Ubbad, they hasten to collecting the gems, and then they would be deceived by some shiny rocks and collect them as gems. They are not gems, they're just rocks, but they shine like gems. And those who played with the sand and built castles of sand and so on are the people who are not really involved in business or trade, and they're not involved in anything. They just waste. They like fun and play, amusement, and stuff like this. So there are examples in this parable of all sorts of people, but it's a very nice, beautiful story. Imam Ibn Qudama reported this in his book Al-Wasiyya, which is a beautiful book. But in order for you to be like the ulama, or as close as he could to the ulama, try to spend a little bit more time learning which gems are best and which are most appreciated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So concerning the question of which gems are best and most appreciated by Allah, Imam Ibn Qudama said in Madarij al-Salikin, the people of only you do we worship and only you do we seek help from. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. The people who realized the station of إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ are four types with regards to the best ibadah and most worthy ibadah. The first type, for them the best ibadah is the hardest, because it is the farthest away from the hawa, or the desire of the nafs. And that's the essence of ibadah, is basically to disobey your hawa. To disobey your hawa. And since the hardest of the ibadat are the farthest away from hawa, then these are the best of ibadat. Certainly, there are some reports, إِنَّمَا أَجْرُكِ عَلَى قَدْرِ نَصَبِكَ. The Prophet ﷺ said to Aisha radiallahu anha that your reward will be congruent with the difficulty or the hardship you encounter. That is when she had to go out to At-Tan'im and make another umrah. Because she had her period and she could not make it with them, and so she had to go out and do it. And the Prophet ﷺ told her, your reward will be congruent with your effort or the hardship you encounter. But this does not mean that you seek hardship. It does not mean that you seek hardship. That's why when the Prophet ﷺ saw a man who vowed to fast standing in the sun told them, command him to continue his fast, but to sit down in the shade. So standing there, Allah, ما يفعل الله بعذابكم إن شكرتم وآمنتم. Why would Allah like tormenting you? So why do you think that standing in the sun is good? You know, basically those ibadat are a means to purification. So fasting, carry on with your fasting. That is good for you. But to fast while standing in the sun is not prescribed. This is not what Allah wants of you. So sit down in the shade and continue your fast. So basically you don't seek out hardship. You don't seek out hardship. But if you have to go through hardship, then know that there is much reward in there. Jihad is hardship. And jihad is then what Salam al-Islam. It's the peak of Islam. Because of the hardship, because here this is a matter of sacrificing your soul and your property, your life, your property, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But do you basically look for it? Do you just make it up so that you could get the reward? No, in fact, the Prophet ﷺ said that, do not seek out to confront your enemies. But if you do have to confront them, be patient, be steadfast. So, likewise, in every regard, if you have to wake up in the morning and if you have like heated water, and like you can use warm water to make wudu in the morning, don't use cold water so that you could, you know, get rewarded for the hardship. But if you wake up and there is no warm water, then know that you'll get rewarded, greatly rewarded, for going through the hardship of making wudu with cold water. That's clear. So when they said that the best ibadah is the hardest ibadah, they were not completely wrong. There is reward in enduring hardship for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it does not mean that you seek out that hardship. The second type, for them, the best ibadah is asceticism, zuhd in dunya, this interest in the dunya, and having this regard for the enjoyments of this life. Because after all, that is what the test is about, is whether you will favor this life over the hereafter or the hereafter over this life. So if you show this interest in this life, then it is the best ibadah according to those. Yet, although they have a point, because that is the hardest thing for people to do. That's hard for people to do. It's much easier for people to just enjoy this life to the fullest. And in addition to this, I'll go to Hajj every year and I make Umrah and I do my 5 daily prayers and so on. So that it's like win-win situation. And win-win situation is not bad. But the idea here is they have to wean yourself off of the love of this dunya and to be ready to sacrifice it and to give it up for the hereafter. If you are ready to sacrifice it for the hereafter, if you are willing at any time, if there is a need for that, to sacrifice this life for the hereafter, then it is okay for you to enjoy the dunya. But unless you are ready to sacrifice it for the hereafter, unless you put the hereafter first and you favor the hereafter more, and whenever there is like a competition between the dunya and the hereafter, you know where you will be inclined, or which side you will be inclined to, this side of the dunya or the side of the hereafter, then given all of this, you could enjoy the dunya. So zuhd is very difficult for people. Zuhd in the dunya is very difficult for people. Because people are كَلَّا بَلْ تُحِبُّونَ الْعَاجِلَةِ. Nay, you love the quick passing one, which is the life of this world. because that is the immediate gratification. And human beings are after immediate gratification in everything. Look at how we eat and how we conduct our lives. We always seek immediate gratification, immediate gratification. It was part of our nature, and that is what we need to wean ourselves from. You need to look beyond that immediate gratification for the life and eternity and the hereafter. But zuhd per se, it is not about zuhd per se, because zuhd could be practiced by people who are not even believers in God. Some people have disinterest in the dunya even without believing in God. So zuhd is not your ultimate pursuit. Therefore, it is not right or wrong. You look surprised. Some people have disinterest in the dunya without believing in God. Some of the atheists are more disinterested in the dunya than many Muslims, than many of us here in this room.
There's some people commit suicide. A lot of people commit suicide and don't believe in Allah.
No, this interest in the dunya, they commit suicide because they are so interested in the dunya, and when they can't get it, then they kill themselves. It's actually a sign of extreme interest, because if you can handle the dunya, and you can handle the hardships of the dunya, and you can handle poverty and so on, you will not commit suicide. But some people are disinterested in the dunya without believing in God. I see examples of those people. People that are not Muslim, or some Muslims that are not practicing, that have this disinterest. They don't really care about the dunya so much, and they can live off of very little, and they can manage. So that is not the hallmark of devotion, to have zuhd in the dunya. So the third type of people, for them the best ibadah is that most beneficial for others. They felt helping the poor and taking care of people's needs and supporting them with money and status is better than the deeds of benefit that are limited to oneself, to the doer. They said that is why the superiority of the scholar over the devout worshipper is like the superiority of the light of the moon over the other stars. The Prophet ﷺ said, فَضْلُ الْعَالِمْ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ كَفَضْلُ الْقَمَرِ عَلى سَائِرِ الْكَوَاكِبِ. The virtue of the alim over the abid, the worshipper, is like the virtue of the light of the moon over the rest of the planets. Which is obvious, because the scholar benefits others, whereas the worshipper benefits himself only. So some said that the benefit that exceeds you, that goes beyond you to others, النفع المتعدي, النفع القاصر, المتعدي that goes beyond you to others, is actually better than the deeds that are of limited benefit for the doer only. They have a point, right? And they can actually support this by reports. There's this report from Tabarani, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when he was asked, ما أحب الأعمال إلى الله ومن أحب الناس إلى الله قال أحب الناس إلى الله أنفعهم للناس. The most beloved people before Allah are those that are most beneficial for the people. وأحب الأعمال إلى الله سرور تدخله على مسلم وتكشف عنه كربة أو تقضي عنه دينا أو تطرد عنه جوعا ولا نمشي مع أخي في حاجة أبتدى عند الحديث. So the best deeds in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to relieve the distress of your brother, to end his hunger, to pay off his debt, or to bring happiness to his heart. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that it is better for me to walk with a brother of mine to help him out on some of his needs than to make i'tikaf in this masjid of mine for a month. So that is a very powerful hadith, and it's authentic. And it goes with this. But it is But if there is any one that has the greatest validity of those three positions, then it would be this one, has the greatest validity for those three positions. Yet the correct position is the fourth position, this one. The fourth type, for them, the best ibadah is working to attain the pleasure of the Lord at each time by that which is the requirement of that particular time and its most suitable function. So the best ibadah during the time of jihad is jihad, even if it leads to foregoing some of one's routine night prayers or fasting, even if it leads to shortening the mandatory prayers. And the best ibadah upon the arrival of a guest is to host them, and doing that even at the expense of some routine preferable works. And the best ibadah during the latter part of the night is keeping occupied with prayers, reading the Quran, supplication. And the best ibadah when approached by a student of knowledge who inquires about the sacred knowledge is to teach them. And the best ibadah during the sickness of your Muslim brother is to visit him, and if he died, to attend his funeral. So the best in different times and situations is to favor the pleasure of Allah over your liking in that particular situation and time by being busy with the required function of that time or situation. Because for every time and every situation, every place, every circumstance, Allah has, something that He favors. So it depends on whether you worship Him according to your liking or according to His liking. The truly devout worshippers are those who worship Allah according to His liking, not their liking. So some of us may be given to prayers or fasting, or some of us may favor one type of ibadah over the other. Some of us may be, and this sometimes also deceives the students of knowledge. They always say that Imam Shafi'i said that it's better for me to learn one mas'ala than to spend the whole night in prayer. So they're always busy learning mas'ala, and they're actually building up their intellectual superiority so that they can eventually show it off. So they ruined their lives because they detached themselves from the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or showing humility before Allah, or praying in the time of sahar, or because so didn't Imam Shafi'i, think about it, did Imam Shafi'i not pray the night prayers? Did he not recite the Quran? And he was always busy learning masail and so on, and debating with others? Did he do this? He didn't do that. In fact, it was reported that Imam Shafi'i would recite the whole Quran once a day. So the idea here, just wait a second. Don't take one particular report and run away with it, because you will never get the balanced picture. You will never get the balanced picture. So the best ibadah is to do what Allah wants of you at the right time and situation, based on Allah's liking, not your liking. So don't, assure yourself, that you're okay because you make Hajj every year. Really, because some people do this. Or because you have been fasting every other day for the last 17 years. Because this may have become a second habit. This may have become very easy for you to do. But are you doing what Allah wants when He wants it at the right time, right situation? Are you trying to figure out what Allah wants of you now and in this particular situation? Because Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu said that istiqama an tastaqima ala al-amri wal-nahi wa la taruga rawagan al-ta'ala. Istiqama, or straightness, is to be straight on the commands and the prohibitions. Be straight with abiding by the commands and prohibitions, and do not beat around like the foxes. So do not beat around the bush like the foxes. And Umar ibn Abdul Aziz said, ليس الاستقامة بكثرة الصلاة والصيام والتفريط بينهما، ولكن الاستقامة أن تقابل الأمر بالائتمار والنهي بالانزجار. أو كما قال. Or, he said what means that istiqamah is not by praying much or fasting much or mixing the two. Istiqamah is when you meet every command by submission and every prohibition by abstention. So you're looking for what Allah desires, what Allah wants, what Allah likes. Not by excelling in some acts of worship and deceiving yourself by this, that you're good because you do this or you do that. And then you transgress the limits and the bounds of Allah. And then you fall short of commitment in other regards, in many other regards. So those who are devout and are always looking out for the pleasure of Allah in every time and every situation, according to the function of that time and that situation. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, and those are the true people of the worship that is absolute, Ahl al-Ta'abbud al-Mutlaq, the worship that's absolute in devotion. And the types before them are the people of restricted worship. They limited themselves. So they limited themselves to certain constraints that Allah did not lay down for them. So some limited themselves to the worship of zuhd, or worship, acts of worship that entail hardship, or acts of worship that are beneficial for others, and so on. Don't limit yourself, don't restrain yourself. Be absolute in your devotion, meaning the pleasure of Allah is what matters, not the act of worship itself, because the act of worship is a means to the pleasure of Allah. So you can sometimes become a captive of a certain act of worship and forget that the vehicle should not be an obstacle between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it could turn into one. It was your vehicle for some time, but then it became a second nature, and then it turns into an obstacle. When does it turn into an obstacle? When it prevents you from doing other things that are more favorable by Allah. And certainly when it causes you this ghurur, or self-deceit, when you say to yourself, I do this, and and then you get this false assurance. And the types before them are people of restricted worship. Whenever one of them gets out of his selected acts of worship, he feels that he is incomplete. So they worship Allah in one way. After all, they worship Allah according to their liking and not His liking. However, the people of absolute worship do not have any biased interest in a particular type of worship that they favor over others. But all they seek is the pleasure of Allah wherever it is. So they keep on moving from one station of servitude to the next. Whenever a station is presented to them, they walk to it. So I am now in one station of servitude, one station of ibadah. But then another station is presented to me that is more favorable to Allah at this time. Then I leave the station in which I am in, even if I'm enjoying it, and I move to the next station, which is presented to me, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deemed to be higher or greater priority at this time or in this situation. So when the Prophet ﷺ walked into this house of one of the Ansar, him and some of his companions, and he had prepared food for them, and some of them were fasting, the Prophet ﷺ ordered them to break the fast and to eat. And he said, تَكَلَّفَ لَكُمْ أَخُوكُمْ. So your brother had, burdened himself for you with effort and prepared the food for you and so on. So break your fasting, because here to sort of bring happiness to your brother by eating from his food would take priority over completing your fast. even though you would say to yourself, well, it's Asr time, I have been doing this for, for a long time, and it's just like a few hours until Maghrib. But you do this because another station was presented to you that takes priority now. So you move from this station to the other one.
So they have to make up for that day?
Well, according to the majority, no. According to the Hanafis, they need to make up for tatawwa. But according to the majority, tatawwa, you don't need to make up for it. And I'm more inclined towards the position of the majority, even though the position of the Hanafis is good for those who are capable of making up for tatawwa. Then it would be a good thing if they make up for tatawwa or optional acts. So he says, so they keep on moving from one station of servitude to the next. Whenever a station is presented to them, they walk to it and stay busy with it until another function appears, and so on throughout their journey until they reach their destination. So if they search for the scholars, if you search for the scholars, you will find them with them. And if you look for the mujahideen, they will be with them. And with those who remember Allah often, and with those who give charity, and those who devote themselves and hearts for Allah. And that is the absolute worshipper, who was not bound by people's expectations of his status, or restricted by any restraints. So people's expectations of your status. Usually, like, people expect you to see you like wearing a turban all the time and sitting in the halaqah and giving a class to someone. But if you see you in the market, taking your kids to the market to buy something for them, then that, in people's eyes, that is beneath your status. But in Allah's side, that's your function. Your kids are your kids. You're a father. You're not just a shaykh. You're not just a da'i. You're also a father, and you happen to be a wife or husband, or you happen to be this or that. So to watch people's expectations, that is the ultimate injury to your sincerity and devotion to Allah, when you watch people's expectations. So do not be bound by the station or the status, al-hal or al-maqam. Because the hal or al-maqam becomes an obstacle then. Al-hal is condition or status. Al-maqam is a station. Al-hal is more temporary than al-maqam. Al-maqam is where you reside. So there is the maqam of sincerity, for instance, the maqam of tawakkul, the maqam, these are maqamat where you should reside all the time. And so don't be bound or restrained by the hal or the maqam. You're seeking the pleasure of Allah at all times, and sometimes you need to move from one station to the other, from one condition to the other, based on the liking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the absolute worshipper who was not bound by people's expectations of his status or restrained by any restraints. And their work was not for the pleasure or interest of their souls in certain worships where they find comfort. Because sometimes that is true. You find certain comfort in certain acts of worship than others. Or you find self-interest in certain acts of worship than others. Self-interest. They are with Allah, devoted to Him and reliant on Him, in His company without any regard for the people. And when they are in the company of the people, they will have no regard for the self or the ego. And if you reach that status, then here you are certainly in a good virtuous condition. قد صحب الله بلا خلق وصحب الناس بلا نفس. وصحب الخلق بلا نفس. Sometimes they express this as قد صحب الخالق بلا خلق وصحب الخلق بلا نفس. قد صحب الخالق, when he's in the company of the Creator, he's detached from the creation. And when he is in the company of the creation, he's detached from the ego, from the self or the ego. Whenever they are with Allah, they eliminate the people from being between them and Him. And whenever they are with the creations, they eliminate their selves or their egos from being in the middle, from being a barrier between them and the people. So when you are with Allah, in order for you to behold the beauty of Allah and the greatness of Allah and be watchful of Allah, you need to eliminate all the people from the middle. Just remove them. And then inshallah, when we talk about the station of muraqabah, we'll talk more about this. And when you are with the people, remove yourself from the middle. Basically, be selfless, be impartial. When you have an argument with your spouse, can we try to do this? You really can. Just say to yourself, what if I were in her place? That is how you remove yourself from the middle. Let me imagine myself in her place or in his place if it is your husband. And if we do this, and if you try to be in the other people's place, then you will remove the self or the ego from the middle, and you act accordingly. So he says here, how great are they? فَوَاهًا لَهُ مَا أَغْرَبَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. How great are they, and how strange amongst the people are they, and how isolated they feel with them, and how great is their comfort in the company of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and rejoice in it. And how great is their serenity and security with Him. Allah is the one sought for help, and upon Him is the reliance, or is our reliance. So this is basically in terms of prioritizing Imam Ibn al-Qayyim's advice, is that you do not get yourself bound by any restraints. What matters is the pleasure of Allah. And the pleasure of Allah varies from time to time. Allah's pleasure, could be in prayer at one time, seclusion at one time, mingling with the people for their benefit and your benefit at one time, and hosting the guest, Qiyam al-Layl. Various times will come for various stations or acts of worship. So be always, seeking in pursuit of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do not limit yourself or bind thyself by any particular act of worship, any particular hal or status, or any particular maqam or station. And I think I'll just break here, because it's a different topic. جزاكم الله خير.